Welcome to another episode of My Wakeup Call. This is the podcast where I find out a little bit about my guests and I save getting to know them much more for the podcast because I know you, our listeners and viewers who are seeing the videos from these, are really interested not only what our people or our guests are up to, but how they came to be up to that. Why that and not something else? And I'm really pleased to have Nina Szewczak on. I probably won't pronounce her name multiple times. I'll just call her Nina. And let me tell you a little bit about her. Her experience and expertise combines over 17 years of work and study in the area of transformation, change, leadership, management, coaching, mentoring, human resources, well-being, mental health, and revolutionizing businesses and lives. Now that is a long sentence. I will, in the future, I'd break that one up. Anyway, she completely transformed her own life twice, and she's helping people and businesses to overcome adversity, turn situations from tragic to magic. That's a good title, From Tragic to Magic. And to get better, not bitter. That's another good title. And to make life and business great again. And you can find out more about her at the midliferevolution.com. And we'll talk about how you can reach her at the end of this. So Nina, it's such a pleasure to have you. And I'll ask you what I ask everyone. What matters most to you? I think I covered a lot of that in the introduction, but I'd like to get it fresh out of your mouth today. What matters most to you? And then share with us something about your childhood. I'm a psychiatrist. My listeners are curious about childhood influences, as am I. And then tell us the story of you and how you came to be focused on what you're focused on.
Wow, that's a lot. So first of all, thank you so much for having me. What matters to me the most, I think, is life itself. I'm very, very passionate about our experience on this planet. I believe that with our chances of being born being less than 1 in over 400 trillion, we are miracles and we're here for a reason. And I believe that life is an incredible opportunity to experience a planet that I'm constantly in awe of. So that's my passion. So my passion is helping people basically see life as this incredible experience, of course, with ups and downs and with challenges and so on, but nevertheless, an incredible experience rather than a chore and misery that we have to get through and survive. In terms of my childhood, well, I had an interesting childhood. I'm originally from Poland. I'm the only child. My parents got divorced early on when I was a baby. Then they go back together. The marriage wasn't good. The whole family setup wasn't very good. My father's an alcoholic, so there was always difficulties there. So I had to grow up very quickly. But I think until quite later in life, I never realized that my childhood had an influence on me. I always thought, well, I had a terrible childhood, and look at me, I'm absolutely fine. Why are people using their childhood as an excuse? Completely clueless as to actually how it shaped me. So I spent the last few years actually unlearning a lot of things and getting to know myself and seeing actually what life is all about and what I have been conditioned to believe to be true against what I actually believe to be true, and what I want, who do I want to become, rather than being the person that I potentially could have been shaped as within my childhood. So it's been an interesting journey for sure, and I got to be where I am because of, I think, a lot of resilience, determination, and often feeling like if I want to achieve something, I am the only person responsible for my life, so I have to make it happen in one way or another, and I have to find a way. Like I came from a family with no money, no connections. I arrived to the UK. I didn't speak a word of English. I didn't know anyone. So I had to make it work. And I did. And then things changed again. So I had to make it work again. But that's life.
So talk a little bit about how to unlearn what you had learned that wasn't true, and how you learned that you could actually have a choice in what you did in life and what your life would become. because there's a lot of people. Maybe the first thing is to realize that our childhood influences influenced us, and it could influence our attitude. It could influence whether we're negative or positive, optimistic or pessimistic. But can you dive into realizing that you did have these childhood influences, and then how you unlearn that?
Yeah, this is a massive lesson in my life. And I think a big part of unlearning is awareness. I think awareness is the biggest power that we have got. If you're unaware of something, you won't change it because you're unaware of it. When you become aware, that gives you the power to decide whether that's something that you want to continue with or whether that's something that you want to change. And of course, change is not easy, but there is a decision whether you're going to put up with what is and therefore settle for whatever the situation is, or whether you're prepared to, have some discomfort and actually create something that you want. So for me, big part of unlearning has been becoming aware of my thoughts, then what the emotions that my thoughts were generating, and like what emotions did I live by. So I often think we talk about, so for me, this is self-awareness. And we often see self-awareness in terms of being aware of the self on our external environment and on other people. So how did I come across? How did I behave? How could I have presented better? And so on. But we don't pay enough attention to the awareness of the self on the self. So our thoughts on ourselves. Our thoughts obviously drive our emotions, and our emotions drive our behaviors drive our actions, and our actions generate our experiences. So that was key for me, to just observe myself and be like, wow, is this really who I want to be? And is what I believe, do I really believe this, or am I just repeating what I've constantly heard or, maybe was exposed to as a child? So this played a massive, massive role. And actually talking about, how childhood shapes you, the comment you made, I have always perceived myself, and I think people saw me as that too, as someone who is extremely positive, super enthusiastic. And then I started to watch myself and I thought, oh my God, I'm actually spending a lot of my time being constantly angry and frustrated about stupid things, like things that don't really matter. But I didn't know how to be any different. It became part of my personality because that was the environment I grew up in, where every little thing triggered anger or frustration, where things that you had to be right, you had to win, like you had to, you had to prove your point. So because that's all I knew, it was part of who I was. That's just, so I didn't notice it until I started to observe it, and I thought, wow, this isn't how I want to live. This isn't who I want to be. And like, it's not really impacting anyone else other than me. I'm sitting here deeply frustrated about meaningless things. So a big part of unlearning for me is becoming aware, so observing yourself, and actually paying attention to your thoughts, to your emotions, to, identifying your beliefs, and then saying, do I want this? And is this supporting who I am and who I want to become? Or is it actually holding me back? And is it actually, do I believe it? Or is it just something that perhaps my parents believed and I just picked up, or, teachers or society, whatever, the influences that we have.
So can you give a specific example? This is a conversational podcast. You've listened to it. So often my guests will trigger a memory in me that's along the line. So I want to share something with you. And I'm not sure that I've shared this on the podcast, even though we're closing in on 500 episodes. Years ago, I met a doctor who we had been interns together. So internship is something you do after medical school. And when I met him, this was some years later, he spoke to me and he said, "Are you seeing a therapist?" And I said, "Why?" He said, "When you were an intern, you were very funny, but you were very sarcastic. Your humor had an edge. It was biting. It was funny." And he said, "We've been talking now for 10 minutes and I don't hear any of that." And I said to him, "Oh, this is great. I'm a psychiatrist and I'm sarcastic. Oh, this is great. I'm really not fit to be a psychiatrist." And he said, No. You're different now." And during the internship, I was sarcastic, and it was it was a defense mechanism. Underneath, I was scared, and my being afraid came because of my childhood experiences, came out as this negative, biting sarcasm. And I had seen a therapist who helped, and that's why he asked, and I told him, and he said, I'm going to see that guy myself. So he said, because I need to change some things. But it was that kind of awareness of someone saying to me, you were funny, but I never would have opened up to you. You know, I never would have lowered my guard because you might say something witty, funny, and biting. But that was an experience that you just triggered in me. And it was really helpful to me to wake up about how my being sarcastic was just a defense mechanism. I was really scared underneath it all. So can you think of any incidents for you where you behaved in a certain way and you just stopped and said, whoa, is that who I want to be? I mean, that was terrible. So can you think of any examples for you?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think the story you shared is very powerful, and I can also resonate with a lot of examples like this. And in fact, my nickname for years used to be Nina the Knife. And recently someone called me Nina Angel. So I laughed and I said, people, transformation is real. I went from Nina the Knife to Nina Angel. And it took a lot of hard work to get there, but it's very rewarding. And I'm glad I did this. But I think actually conversation with my mother prior to my wedding was extremely difficult. I wouldn't even call it a conversation. It was beyond arguments. And after that, I thought, is this really who I am? Is this really how I want to behave? And like, what does this really achieve? And it wasn't a response. It was a reaction. It was just a set of automatic behaviors that I've had for years. And I didn't notice that before. And then I thought, wow, A, this isn't who I want to be. B, this does not achieve anything in any way, shape, or form. So I need to work on this and I need to change it. And of course, it's difficult because you've lived by those sets of thoughts, emotions, behaviors, and actions for years and years. So then you really have to look deep within and you have to be really honest with yourself. And I feel that actually, you know, being honest with yourself is the most difficult type of honesty, right? Because we all have different parts to ourselves. We all have shadows, and looking deep within can be difficult. At the same time, I find it extremely powerful and rewarding when you're able to do that.
Yeah, you know, and the title of your and your website, The Midlife Revolution. Let's dive into that, because one of my observations is that many of the things we do to survive and cope early in life hold us back, you know, later on. So my sarcasm really was a protective mechanism. People thought I was funny, but no one could get close to me, and I didn't want people to get close to me. And I realized that was, fortunately, I realized that before midlife. But can you talk about that at all? That sometimes the way we act and cope early on holds us back later on.
Yes, and actually, I totally agree with what you just said. And I also think that sometimes when things happen, so I called it midlife revolution because I had to I was facing an adversity and I had to revolutionize my life as a result. I didn't have to, but I wanted to revolutionize my life as a result of it. But I think some of the coping mechanism, in my case, for example, the coping mechanism would be to close off, to be super independent, to not allow anyone in, to just, you know, close my heart, forget the emotions, not deal with things, and pretend that everything is okay, because that's how I was conditioned to believe that I from early on, I was expected to be able to move on from very traumatic experiences to be able to just get on with life. And this is what life is about. You just crack on with things and, don't worry. So I wasn't able to process emotions, and I wasn't able to deal with difficult emotions. So then when things happened midlife, I thought, okay, well, I kind of know where not dealing with things is leading to, because I've already faced the consequences for years. So now I have got choice to either get bitter or better, to move on with wisdom or with wounds and then carry them like a badge of honor, to turn tragic into magic, and either to close my heart, not trust anyone again, or actually to open up even more, since it was already shattered, and lead with more love and kindness. So my kind of way of revolutionizing was to go for the wisdom, to go for getting better, and to go, to move on with more trust and more love and kindness, which was kind of the opposite of I think what everyone felt would happen, considering the situation. So I agree that the things that, in childhood or the earlier ages sometimes help us to cope, because we don't know how to cope, right? And a lot of, I didn't have the support. When someone really close died in a car crash, I was 16. The response, not only did I find out by a phone call, but the response I got was call yourself lucky that you weren't in a car with them. The only thing, at that age, in that situation, I wished for was that I was in that car with them. I didn't want to be alive. But it was kind of, I'm getting emotional. This was I've never got emotional on a podcast before. And this was over 20 years ago. But this is how I was trained to be. And this is kind of to led me to a lot of the decisions that I made, and a lot of the behaviors that I then had, and a lot of the actions that I had taken, because that became a set of automatic behaviors and automatic reactions rather than considered responses. So then I had to unpick all of that and learn all of it, and then decide, what do I want to bring with me into the future as part of who I wanted to be, and what actually needed to be processed and be grateful for, because ultimately it got me to who I am right now, but leave it in the past.
So unpack, you're getting emotional a couple of minutes ago. And you said, geez, this is something that I don't usually get. So I think it's an opportunity. I am a psychiatrist, for us to dive in. And if you can say, I think I got emotional when I was remembering this incident because.
Well, I think I got emotional because I felt like I didn't have the support and the understanding at that young age. Of course, now I would probably go through the experience differently. But I think at that age, and considering that the people who died were close friends, and one of them was my first love. And, and now you look back and you'd never be together, and it would never work out. But at that age, it feels like it is the end of the world. And it was the end of the world for all of those people who unfortunately lost their lives in that accident. And I felt like I didn't have the emotional support. I felt like I wasn't understood. And perhaps I wasn't given the time to grieve that maybe I needed, or I wasn't really allowed to grieve in a way. Not because anyone had banned me from grieving, but I didn't know how to grieve. And there wasn't really anyone to say, it's okay, it's okay to feel like you're feeling, or whatever. It was kind of, take some actions, keep yourself busy, and keep your mind busy so you don't think about it approach.
So I'm going to try channeling you right now, because I hear you saying something to me between your words. Would that be okay if I?
Of course.
You've heard some of my podcasts, and I do this kind of it's a psychiatrist to me. What I hear you saying about that incident is, I got past it, but I never got over it completely. And the reason I never got over it completely is because I never allowed myself to go through the tragedy. And I didn't allow myself to go through the tragedy because I didn't feel safe. Because if I felt the depth of the tragedy, and I was all alone with it. I didn't have a supportive mom or something. There was probably a part of me that didn't dare feel how badly I felt, because maybe I felt like I would fall apart and never come back, but because I want to be a complete person now. I want to be someone who doesn't skip over things that have deep feelings, and I want to deeply feel things. And it's my journey in life. It's my journey to being a human being instead of someone who runs away from things, or becomes Nina the knife. So is any of that accurate?
I think all of it is very accurate. I think it's 100% accurate. And I can also see how what happened with my life last year, I have completely allowed myself to sit in the pain, to deal with the emotions, to give myself the time. And that worked really well for me. Whereas I think, the fact that I'm getting emotional over something that happened 23 years ago now, I didn't deal with it before.
Well, maybe what's happened is, in our conversation, is you're getting compassionate with yourself back then. And so you're going back and basically saying to that inner part of you that never got over it, you're saying it's okay to have some feelings about this. You actually had a great life. And if you were afraid that you would never get over it, never have a great life, or never have a life, I'm here to tell you, young Nina, that you had a great life. I'm remembering another memory, and see if these exchange of memories. This one's kind of embarrassing, so I'm going to dive into it. I think when I was in maybe the third or fourth grade, I'm the youngest of three children, and I think I felt really, really alone. I was also very curious. I've always been curious for all my life. And it was a Friday afternoon, and in our school there was a gym, and next to the gym was a locker room. And so what happened is I went into the locker room, and I went into a locker. I could fit into a locker, because I was small, and I closed the door on myself, and I couldn't get out. And I felt so embarrassed and so ashamed that I didn't make any sounds. And then I heard the buses leave. And then I heard the late buses leave. And then I thought, I'm going to be here all weekend. And I started moaning, and I started crying. And a janitor came in and opened the locker and let me out. And I was so embarrassed, I said to him, "Oh, someone pushed me into the locker." I didn't do this, because I was so embarrassed. And of course, this caused a little episode where the principal of the school found out that this happened. So Monday, my parents were called in for us to talk about, how little Mark was locked in the locker. And even then, I remember lying and saying, "Oh, someone pushed me into the locker and I didn't see who it was." And I'm sure the principal and I'm sure my parents knew I was lying. I don't remember how it turned out, but I think it was, I think I was curious, because when I went into the locker, this is a little bit overly psychological. It's almost like I wanted to go into a cocoon, because there was a part of me just felt lousy, or maybe I wanted to go back into the womb. So maybe that's why I was curious about the locker, and then I locked myself in. And so I've never done this. So I'm imagining that I'm imagining little me, and the meeting with the principal and my parents is over. And I'm imagining going back to little me and saying, no one pushed you into the locker, you know that. And I could see little me saying, oh no, someone pushed me into the locker. And I'm looking at little me saying, nobody pushed you into the locker. You went into the locker by yourself. And you went into the locker by yourself because you were looking for something. And you went into the locker because you're very curious. And it's good that you're curious. In fact, you know, this curious part of you that made you walk into the locker, that's going to be part of your whole life, but it's going to make your life wonderful. Because you're curious, you're going to grow up and you're going to understand things that nobody else understands. And you're going to grow up and you're going to help people who feel like going into a locker. And you're going to understand them so they don't have to go into a locker. And it's going to turn out okay. And then I can imagine little me looking at me saying, who are you? Why should I believe you? And then I can imagine looking at little me saying, I'm you. I'm you. And we grew up and it turned out okay. So I've never done that before, Nina. So you're very good at what you do.
Well, this was also a wonderful story, and thank you so much for sharing. And I think those stories shape us so much, and we don't share enough of them. Or not many people share enough of those stories that actually, or maybe sometimes we don't even reflect on them enough to then be able to share. But there's a humongous amount of power in what you shared, and very often the stories. So that, like, just I really appreciate the story you shared, but just like the story you shared, I picked those stories from your podcast and from your videos and so on, because I know you like to add value and train people through different stories. And I can imagine that if I wasn't actually in this podcast, but I would be listening to you telling the story, that would be a story that would stick with me. So I think this will be very, very valuable for the audience, because it's a very powerful story. And I also think there's so much power in, like, how you beautifully illustrated it, looking, you know, talking to the younger version of yourself, and saying it's okay, it's gonna, you know, it's gonna, you can tend to the things that we didn't know when we were at a certain age, whenever the things have happened. So thank you for sharing. That was really beautiful.
Well, thank you. So let me bounce it back towards you. So can you think of something that in that incident where those people who you're close to died, and your reaction to it, your non-reaction, can you think of something positive from that? Because when I remembered being in the locker, I don't remember anything good about it. I don't remember that, oh, it was good that I'm a curious person. And you know, and when you're in school, it doesn't necessarily reward curiosity. They want you to follow lessons. This is the lesson. This is when it's due. And often curiosity gets you in trouble. So can you think of something, going back to your 16-year-old self, that that was good, that it was good that you kind of froze and you denied it, because that helped you break through. That helped you at some point in your life make you aware that you needed to stop denying things, that you needed to start re-experiencing them.
Mm-hmm. I think, I think there's few things. I think that the good thing is that, going back to that scenario, and what I learned from that freezing is that when then I was exposed to other traumatic experiences, I knew that I can I can react in the same way. So I knew I would be able to cope, but again, just freezing and moving on, and I'll be able to, carry on with life, and I'll be able to create what maybe society perceives as successful life, without necessarily having to tend to the emotions. But then that awareness had also given me a choice of, do I really want to react in the same way, or do I really want to respond in a different way and learn a different response? I think the other thing that I had learned, actually, this just came to my mind now as we're having this conversation, and I've been through therapy, not for this reason, but I've worked with various therapists, and actually we've never gone down that route. But I think what I've just discovered, literally, as you were talking, and as I am talking, is that I had so much more heart than I ever thought that I did. I just didn't allow myself to feel it. So for years, and this was a running joke, I even said to my boss once, she said, when things don't feel right, like your intuition. And I literally said to her, I don't think I have such a thing. I just don't have it. I don't know. Because I trained myself not to have it. To me, it was yes or no, right or wrong, black or white. That's all I knew. So there was no feelings involved. But I think as we're discussing it, I go back to that 16-year-old self, and there was so much love and so much care and so much emotion that I was now in my another traumatic situation. I was now able to actually reconnect to that heart and reconnect to the emotions, and decide that is the response that I wanted, which has been really helpful.
Something I'm noticing, and this might be because I sometimes come up with TED Talks for my guests, or TEDx Talks, and I love the midlife revolution. In addition to that, there's a part of you that likes binary thinking. Do you want to be bitter or better? Do you want to be wounded or well? And I think maybe a talk on the binary you, and you talk to people about those things, the binary you, because there's something. One of the things that I coach people on is how to be compelling instead of convincing. And compelling opens people's minds, and you have to earn that. And then after you've opened their minds, you maybe get the chance to convince them of something that they should do. And you have this natural ability, and you're attracted to these binary thinkings, and that's very compelling. When I heard the word, wounded or well, bitter or better, it got through to me. And I have a feeling that you have a lot of those, and I think people might be. It's not a great title, the binary you, but something, or maybe it's going binary. And people will say, "What the heck is going binary?" But then you gain their curiosity. Do you follow me? And if you can gain their curiosity, and I think midlife revolution is wonderful, but going binary would cause me to say, what is that? Whereas midlife revolution is, it triggers, what's that about? But it doesn't hook me in like going binary. And there's a part, and then that could be your brand. I mean, again, I don't want to destroy your brand as it is. You're the midlife revolution person. But in addition to that, you could try it out. If you're the going binary woman, people are going to say, what the heck is that? And then, do you follow me? And then you just draw them into that. And then also, and I think the main part of your talk would be reaction versus response. We may not have a choice about our immediate reaction, but before we do something destructive, we actually have a choice about how we respond. Really? I didn't know that. And then that's how and then you share with people how they can do that. So does any of that make any sense?
Well, Mark, honestly, I actually have been thinking about TED Talk for the past few months, but I keep toying with the idea, and I'm like, what would be like something that actually is an idea that's worth spreading, and what would stick? And use the example of Disney owning Pirates of the Caribbean, and obviously your book, talking to crazy, talking to a-holes, and going viral in Russia, and so on. So there was something there, but it wasn't tangible enough. And I was just, sorry, I wasn't looking at you because I was taking notes as you were saying, because actually what you had said, and I feel like sometimes you need that mirror, right? Someone actually play things back to you and see how the things that you're sharing are landing is really helpful. So honestly, this is like, it's incredible. Thank you so much for sharing. Absolutely resonates. And I love the idea. And I think as soon as we are done, I'm going to be drafting ideas for how I could make it happen. This is incredible. Thank you so much.
Yeah. So if you've listened to my podcast, you know about this mental real estate that I learned from a friend of mine at Disney. And to our listeners, well, our listeners have heard this, but listeners who are hearing it for the first time, a friend of mine, Tony Baxter, introduced the concept of mental real estate to me. And he said, mental real estate is when you say something that's kind of familiar, but it's not. And he said, Pirates of the Caribbean owns the word pirates in the minds of kids. So Disney owns pirates. And so going binary is sort of familiar, but it's not. It's, well, what's that about? Do you follow me? That could have a lot of mental real estate. And again, you put a lot into the midlife revolution, and I like that. And it's strong. It doesn't grab, at least to me, it doesn't grab me as much as going binary. If we had a conversation and I said, so, what do you do, Nina? You could say, well, I have a passion, and my whole life has been about going binary. I would say, what the heck is that? But then you'd have me. And then you'd throw those different, then you'd throw those different things. Well, did you know that you could be wounded or well? Oh, say more about that. You could be bitter or better. Wow. Anyway, enough of that. Okay, so I just wanted to whet your appetite. You took some notes, and you can keep it or throw it away.
No, I'm definitely keeping it. I made some notes. I'll be rewatching and re-listening, and I'll be drafting a plan for TED Talk for sure. And actually, it does feel like all the ideas that I had. And like, thank you for the feedback about midlife revolution. I'm also never attached to anything. I feel like everything in life is a bit of an experimentation and exploration. I'm also curious, and my biggest thing is I want to help. I don't care what it's called. Like whatever works for people, and whatever gets to people, and whatever gets people to see the message and feel the message and see that they can apply it and do it for themselves is what matters to me. I'm not attached to it being a name associated with me, let's say.
Well, I feel the same way, but I'm hearing more about the importance of a brand, in terms of marketing. And if you listen to my podcast, when I've asked people what matters most to them, I would say at least a third of the 500 episodes, it's, well, I want to make a difference in the world. I want to help people. I want to help people get over things. And those are all wonderful, but they're not necessarily different from each other. And, and then people will share how they're doing it. So I'm taking a little issue with you, as I have with myself, because, in as you said, in Russia, my book, Talking to Crazy, became How to Talk to A-Holes. And when I went to Moscow and I went into bookstores, I'd say, "Do you carry this book?" And they'd say, "Oh, it's the How to Talk to A-holes guy. Can we take a picture with you?" You know, so anyway, play around with it, and we'll follow up and see what your mind comes up with.
I love it. I love it. Thank you. I'm really, really grateful for that. I am.
Well, you're welcome. You're welcome. So, so if I pose this opening question again, what matters most to you, and you think it'll matter most to you at the end of your life? I'm wondering if I'm channeling you. You could say, and if I'm Nina, how I might answer that is, I of course I want to help people. I want to help people to have the best life possible, and I want to introduce people to a way to have the best life possible by helping them to go binary. At which point I would then say, "Tell me about going binary." Do you hear it? It's different than, I want to help people have the best life possible, which is all wonderful. But if you ended it with, I want to help them do that by going binary, what is that? Well, you can be wounded or well, you can be bitter or better. Really? Do you see how that would draw me in?
Absolutely. And I absolutely love the idea. And actually, as you're talking about kind of my final judgment day, at the end, I do think about quite often, and how do I want to live my life that when it comes to the last day? But I will have an opportunity to have a judgment or not, is another matter. But I want to live every day where I'm able to, whenever I go, to feel like I've done my best. And actually, my big thing has been to be an example of possibility, to show that you don't need to, you don't need to have specific advantages. Of course, it's lovely, or privileges, but you can also make something out of your life and create whatever you want, despite not having the best start and so on. But I can totally see, and I 100% agree, that just wanting to help people and wanting to help the world is so vague. And I would always call it airy-fairy, because, well, how do you do that? And, so many people want to do this. So actually, your idea and like how specific it is, but also the mental real estate that comes with it. And I've been thinking about the mental real estate for ages, since I heard you talk about it on various different talks. I was like, what is the mental real estate of what I'm doing? And so thanks so much for this, because you've just given it to me. How helpful. That's amazing.
So you just triggered a new binary. So, I'm a speech writer for people. And so people will say, well, these are your words. And I say, yeah, but you inspired it. And so I'm giving this to you, so you don't have to quote me. But here's a new binary that I just thought of. The binary is in spite of or because of. You can live your future either in spite of a lousy childhood or because of a lousy childhood that enabled you to transform.
Well, Mark, I love it, and I'm definitely going to quote you on that.
We did it together, Nina.
Well,
I never would have come up with that ever if I didn't have this conversation with you.
Well, I think that's the beauty of conversations, right? And building on each other's ideas and inspiring each other.
Yeah. So we gave birth to it. We came up with it because of the way we're having this conversation. We didn't come up with that idea in spite of our conversation. And what I'm hoping is listeners will get a sense of that, because you also talked about possibilities. And possibility is more because of. because of having a conversation that's not pat answers, because we're having a curious and generative conversation, we're coming up with things that neither of us ever thought of before.
I didn't know what to, well, obviously I know your podcast and I've listened to quite a few episodes, but when you go into it, like, of course, we don't discuss any questions before and we just see where the conversation is going to go. So I was very excited because I knew it was going to be amazing because it's you. But I did not expect that it's going to go how it went. And it's like way beyond anything that I could have imagined in terms of how incredibly helpful it's been. And it obviously still is as we're conversing. But how incredibly helpful from even going through my emotions and, you know, me identifying things from 23 years ago to this. Like, I totally did not think that this is the route we're going to take. And it's just, and it's incredible. And I think this is what I love about working with people. And this is what I love about being open. And I love not having a script. And I love, you know, I talk to people a lot about improvisation and the importance of it. Because to me, it is about noticing everything. It is about letting go. It is about using everything, and then seeing everything as an offer. And I think that's an improv model, actually. But I think that's the beauty of life, right? When you go in completely open-minded and see where the conversation is going to take you, because you can build so much more than if you come pre-prepared with, this is what I want my message to be, and so on. So this is absolutely wonderful, and you're such an incredible influence and inspiration.
So here's okay. See, you just triggered another thing. So we have your TEDx talk figured out. We have your brand figured out. Here's a podcast that you're going to do, and it's going to be called Let's Improvise. And then you have people on and you have a conversation, because that's what we did, is we just started improvising and we're feeding off each other. I think you have natural abilities and skills at that, but that would be incredibly inviting. This is a podcast. This is a conversational podcast where we each leave it having learned and discovered something that never would have happened if we didn't have the podcast. Welcome to Let's Improvise. Anyway, we're just spitballing, Nina.
Wow, Mark, will you be my first guest?
I'll do that and we'll improvise. We'll improvise.
Okay. Now you probably fell under pressure to say yes because we're recording.
Now here's the
I
bad.
would absolutely love that.
Yeah, here's the bad news from today's episode. If other people listen to this episode and they come on as a guest, they're going to say, Mark, I want you to do with me what you did with Nina, and I'm going to get performance anxiety. I don't know if I can make it happen. It just happened with Nina. You know, you're making me nervous.
Well, I think in every conversation, there is a different magic. You have to allow space for magic to appear and for improvisation, right? So I think when you come with expectations, it's never going to work this well. So I think the true magic with every guest is in the guests and in yourself being open, right, and seeing where it's going to lead to. Because you wouldn't want to repeat the same magic with everyone, because it wouldn't be magic, right? It would just become a formula and standard. And no one wants to do that.
Well, maybe this is the magic. You've listened to my podcast, so you know that Larry King was one of my mentors, and I used to go to breakfast with him. And part of his magic, why guests love to be on his show, is he never cornered people to make them look bad. He wasn't judgmental. I mean, he had personal thoughts, but he wasn't judgmental. And I mean, he could say to a guest, hey, what's with the green hair? But he could say to another guest, you shot a lot of innocent people in that school. What was that about? But it would be completely non-judgmental. And so people love to be his guests. And maybe what's happened is I think when we're in a conversation with someone and we feel that they're judging us or evaluating us, we have our guard up. In fact, it may be that when we go into most conversations, we project on other people, oh, they're going to be evaluating us, they're going to be judging us, so I better be ready. And I think what I learned from Larry is if I can just be open and non-judgmental, my guest, like you, join it. It's almost like you're saying, I don't know where this conversation is going, but I like it. Let's let it go there. And if you're listening in, I hope you'll share your insights, why this conversation or how this conversation went where it went. Again, my immediate idea is that it was an opportunity to spontaneously improvise, and that I saw it as an opportunity. According to you, I've talked about the locker story before, so I didn't know that. It's probably my Alzheimer's kicking in. But
No. This is the first time I heard it. I was saying that if I was a listener to this podcast, it would definitely stand out to me as a story. So I haven't heard that story before. I was just saying that if I wasn't in this recording right now and I would just be a listener, that is a story that would definitely have a massive impact on me and it would stay with me.
Well, that's good. Now, here's the bad news. I can't repeat it again because it wouldn't be spontaneous. I got to come up with some other stories.
And I'm sure you will. And this is recorded, so people can always re-listen to it. And I'm sure you have got plenty of other incredible stories that will come out at the right time in the right conversations, right? When you allow for them to come out spontaneously.
Yeah. If you're listening in to Nina and me, I think something that I would like to have happen for you listening in, and I think Nina would join me, is we both talked about going back to parts of us that we left behind because we were so busy surviving it. We didn't have time to think about it or go through our feelings. And you might think, well, what's wrong with that? Well, because if you do that too often, you're going to leave more and more of yourself behind. And I think it's safe to go back to any time in your life that you never thought you'd survive, just to tell that younger version of yourself, hey, you not only survived, here's another binary. You not only survived, you thrived. And you thrive because this thing that you're going through is going to give you the ability to understand other people who go through these things. And there's millions of people who go through these things. And you're going to be able to help them. Really? I'm going to go back into the locker, see what else I find out.
This is wonderful, wonderful. And I think the improvisations and us being spontaneous, I think we both share love for learning. So to me, go into things without judgment and without, preconceived ideas of what I want to get out of something, but just going with curiosity and seeing what happens. I think that to me, the main driver is, well, if I leave it open, I don't know what I'm going to learn, and I'm definitely going to learn something. Whereas if I go with, this is what I want to happen, or this is what I think is going to happen, then you kind of close yourself off to the learnings because you're focusing so much on what you think needs to happen that you don't notice the things that are actually happening, or you don't listen and be in the moment because you're thinking about what do I want to get across next. Whereas I'm sitting here and I'm like, I have no idea what I'm going to say next or what the next question is going to be. And who cares, because I'm enjoying the moment as it is, and I'm enjoying the story and see where it's going to take us, which I think is beautiful.
Well, you gave me, this is fresh. I'm sure I never said this before. Something I've talked about from my book, Just Listen, is I I talk about be a pal to other people. And what is a pal means purposeful, agendaless listening, meaning you drop your agenda because your agenda is trying to control and force the other person. And your purpose is, to be of service. But I'm going to add to that, I'm going to add to that, a different version is purposeful, agendaless learning. I've never said that before. And I think I think I may convert it to that. Purposeful, agendaless learning, because learning means you're being curious, you're listening, and you're listening in order to learn, which communicates to the other person that they're worth listening to, that they're actually teaching you something. And they didn't know they were doing that. And that's going to cause them to feel better. Wow, I really taught you that? So this conversation has been just filled with purposeful, agendaless learning. Because I've learned many, many things, and it sounds like you've learned a few things on your end of it.
I learned dance. It's incredible, like very, very profound. And so grateful for it, because like I said, when we first started, I had no idea where it's going to go or what we're going to discuss, and just let's go with the flow and see what emerges. And not only has it been beautiful conversation, but so many very profound learning moments for me. And as someone who loves learning and spends a lot of time learning, reflecting, being curious, exploring, wondering, and so on, it's wonderful for me to have a conversation that covers so much and is so rich in all of those things in a short space of time, really. And of course, learning from a legend like yourself, I feel extremely honored and privileged to be able to have the conversation.
Flattery will get you everywhere with me. I just thought of a good opening, because I've really I've stopped doing in-person speeches. I'll do it by Zoom, but at this stage of my life, I'm trying to be a very present husband, a parent, and grandparent. And so here's an opening when you give a talk, if you dare to do it. And if you lean it, now you might say, you might come back and say, Mark, my audience wasn't as open to me as you were, Mark. But the opening would be, you get up there, you look at the audience, and you say, I have no idea what I'm about to talk about, but I have a feeling that it's going to work out for both of us. I have no idea what I'm about to talk about, but I have a feeling it's going to work out well for both of us. That audience would look at you with amazement, with total curiosity, because what they'd be hearing is someone who felt confident enough to say, I don't have to be in control. I trust you, my audience, to be able to have a spontaneous conversation with you, even if I'm doing most of the speaking. And I just have a good feeling that it's going to turn out pretty well. I would, if I was in the audience, but of course I'm a little bit crazy. If I was in the audience, I would be riveted, like, oh my God, what is she going to say?
I love this. And it actually reminds me of the fact that people often say to me, I can't wait to see what you're going to do next in your life. And I say, yeah, me neither. And I genuinely mean it. People think that I am joking when I'm like, I have no idea what I'm going to do next. So I have no idea where I'm going to be next month. So see what happens, see what emerges, see what I learn. So when I say I have no idea, they think, are you kidding? And I'm like, no, I genuinely, you are excited for me. I am excited for me too, because I don't know what will unfold. So actually the opening would be right up my street. And it would reflect a kind of my life and how I operate as well, which would be absolutely wonderful.
Yeah, I remember I gave a talk to a bunch of CEOs, and afterwards, one of them came up to me and they said, you know, we were all riveted because we didn't know what you were going to say next. And I said, uh, that made two of us.
Absolutely lovely.
So, my friend, this has been a wonderful conversation for you. I hope for me, and especially for our listeners. So, where can people find out more about you?
Well, on www.themidliferevolution.com, or people can find me on Facebook or LinkedIn under Nina, Nina, Szewczak, or on Instagram under Nina_the midlife revolution. So I'm kind of all over the place, like I guess everyone nowadays. But I love to connect with people, and I love getting voice notes from people, and I always respond, and I'm always happy to share anything that I've learned, anything that people find interesting, or any questions that people might have. I love to answer. So yeah, please don't hesitate to reach out.
Yeah. And if you're listening in or viewing, do follow up with her, because I don't think our conversation that she and I have just had was an accident. I think it was an amazing, for me, possibility. I didn't know at the beginning of the talk of what kind of possibility it would be, but it blew me away. And I have a feeling that a lot of that is due to Nina. And so do follow up with her, because I think you will discover possibilities that will blow you away too. So everybody take care, mind those wake up calls, pay attention to them, don't be afraid of them, and we'll catch you again next time.